Well, there's two things I want you to think about if you want to make a lot of money. That no matter where you work or what you do, you act like you own part of the place. We basically have zero survival risk. All we have is ego risk. Fear holds us back really just based on our egos. And so because of that, we don't ever progress.
If money was a person, if it was a relationship in your life, how is that relationship for you? How do we start rewiring you emotionally in your nervous system to feel safe with money when it comes to you, when it leaves you?
You can achieve financial freedom through saving over decades. So if you are comfortable with waiting to become a millionaire until you're 65 plus, compound interest and investing over time has proven that that is totally feasible and possible. The problem is that then your best years, they're behind you. And so I don't think that we should believe in getting rich fast. And I don't think we should believe in get rich quick schemes. But I don't think that saving our way to 65 to where we finally have a time to enjoy life then makes a lot of sense to me. I think there's got to be a middle road. And the middle road being we combine earnings plus savings, plus investment opportunities, plus risk in order to make more money. And, there are a couple statistics that shocked me. And one was that, if you want to be a millionaire in the US, 60% of all millionaires own a business. They have ownership in something. They don't have to own the thing outright, but they've got a percentage of equity in a business that is a private equity investment. If you want to make that you level of money, so let's say 30 million plus, 88% of people who are worth 30 million plus, they have ownership stakes in companies. So you can be an employee and make a lot of money, but what you should be trying to do is during your employment, take that money and invest it in things that get you equity. And this is my big pushback with entrepreneur porn today, is there's a lot of people that are like, go all in on your own thing, only do you, sleep on the couch, start in the garage. I don't think that they've looked at the statistics on that, because what you would be much better off to do is, instead of taking a 90% failure rate, which is what most startups have over any 10-year period, and a 3 to 4 year period in which you make nothing, why don't you take a 100% rate of you being able to afford your mortgage, AKA a job, and take the money you make while you for sure can afford your mortgage and start investing some of that on the side along with your skill set to get some equity in companies. And I think we usually only think about that in Silicon Valley-based startups, but it can be available for all. If we actually knew how to negotiate and provide real value, and we stopped disconnecting what we do for a living from how we make money from the company, those are totally divorced. But if we brought those back together again, we would know how to negotiate with our companies, with our vendors, and how to bring deals to the companies we work for so that we could all have more ownership. But education has taken that away from us. And we think only the owner at top can own anything. And I have to go all in my business if I ever want to become an owner of anything. And I've got to travel through this death zone of 90% failure rate in order to one day maybe become the 10% that's profitable.
Right. Maybe.
And
the odds are against you versus this is more of a very practical, proven method. And, we think about Wall Street in relationship to money, and you are bringing this paradigm of Main Street millionaire. And you mentioned investing and having equity in a business, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because when I hear that initially, if I wasn't exposed to your work, I'd think that's not something that I could do. It would be if I was a part of something getting started.
Yeah. Well, there's two things I want you to think about if you want to make a lot of money, and you want to never have that feeling again about, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford the things I need to enjoy my life or just get by, man. So if you want to never have that feeling again, the first thing is, I think people should start taking on what we call an owner's mindset. This is extremely rare in a world in which we're all victims all day long. It's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else's problem. It's not ours. Owner's mindset is this, that no matter where you work or what you do, you act like you own part of the place. And what does it mean to be an owner? It means you understand how the place makes money. It means you understand how you make money for the place. It means that you understand and are aligned with the company on helping it grow overall. It means you're not an I, you're a we mentality. And if you have this type of owner's mentality, you can get a percentage ownership in any business over time. And how do I know that? Well, we know that even the guy who came up with Cheetos, for instance, was a janitor at Pepsi Coke before he created the idea for Cheetos. Then he climbed the corporate ladder. He came up with this idea for Cheetos. He got equity in the company. Now he's very, very wealthy. This is available at almost every single company out there. The problem is most of us don't care enough to become valuable enough to a company for them to consider giving us equity or allowing us to invest in order to get equity. Two paths. And simultaneously, most of us don't want to have an owner's mindset. We want to say, like, not my problem, not my thing. Boss, increase my salary. Boss, make it easier for me. Make it somebody else's problem. So I want to change that mentality. And the third thing that I think we should really obsess on is, like, there aren't very many chances in life we get for a generational wealth creation event. I had an old economist, and I was in 2008. I was working at a financial firm. And I remember in 2008, 2009, 2010, that economist was speaking to a group of people. His name's Brian Westbury. And the group of people were asking about what stocks they should buy during that time period. And Brian's answer was, yes. Yes. The whole market was completely depreciated. The whole market was on sale. What stock? Yes, largely. Now, if you had asked Brian then 5, 6, 7 years later what stock to invest in, more particular. But the whole market was on sale during that time period. So there were lots of us who got lucky and, I bought some Goldman Sachs stock, and that stock and everything else was a yes back then. Well, right now we have something very similar happening, which is what I talk about, the baby boomer retirement, the silver tsunami, and the fact that we're having small businesses everywhere either have their owners age out or start shutting their doors. It's happening around the world. And what we don't have is we don't have enough buyers who know how to buy businesses to take over these small business owners. And we don't have actually enough sellers, aka owners of small business, that know that they have sellable assets and know how to sell those assets. And so I think we are sitting on one of these generational wealth creation events. And if we understand how to do deal making, if we understand how to be owners in our mindset, we can actually set ourselves and our future generations up for success. And that doesn't happen that often.
Simultaneously, we also have the great resignation going on. And I see a bridge there, potentially. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, you're right. So, we've talked about this for a while with young people, our generation and those younger than us, opting out, basically, right? Quiet quitting. They don't want to work at big companies anymore. They want to have work-life balance. And I understand why. For the first time ever, a 30-year-old today makes less than a 30-year-old, than their 30-year-old parent did at the same age. So for the first time ever, we're not progressing in American society for this generation on a dollar-for-dollar basis. Simultaneously, houses are more expensive than they've ever been. Credit card debt is at all-time highs. Student loan debt is at all-time highs. Inflation is eating away at our dollars. And although we have a very low unemployment rate, our wages haven't increased. We have really bad wage stagnation, even though we have productivity that's increased. And so young people are like, it. Like, I'm not making more money. I can't afford anything. So I'm just going to go to a Taylor Swift concert that costs $3,000 because I can't afford my mortgage anyways, right? And so we see a lot of this YOLO attitude happening in the world from, online apes and NFTs to Taylor Swift concert tickets at crazy valuations. Why? Because young people are like, what am I saving for? And I can't earn enough to actually invest in assets. So there's a big opt-out culture. They're like, I'm over it. I'm over it. And I think we have an opportunity for this generation if they want to work hard and if they actually want to do the only thing that I know for sure leads to money, which is short-term pain for long-term gain. Then I think they could be the buyer of the baby boomer that is selling their business. And if you think about it this way, these two generations have hated each other forever, right? They've been like, okay, boomer. And they've been like, oh, lazy millennial, right? Like at each other. But what if they're actually the solution to each other's problems? What if if like your parents' friends who are 65 plus looking to retire, they don't have kids or their kids don't want to take over their small business? Can we go back to how this country started and have you apprentice under one of those owners, learn how their business works, and eventually take over the business and pay them a royalty or an annuity for their business? Is it immediate rich? No. And why would I go screaming about this on the internet? Warren Buffett has like the best line. Remember, Jeff Bezos asked Warren Buffett at an event, he said, why do you tell everybody about your strategy if it works so well? Like if it works year after year, why do you tell everybody? And Buffett said, because nobody wants to get rich slowly. And I think that's the same feeling I have. If you are willing to put in 3 to 5 years of learning deal making, of finding deals, and then getting ownership in businesses, your next 30 to 50 years look totally different. And I'm willing to talk about it on the internet because there will be very few humans who are willing to do what it takes, not what they want.
Yep. We evolved having this apprenticeship, just taking over the family business. But today there's so many options, right? And we go to school and we are educated in all these different modalities. And then we're supposed to figure out, what do you want to do from all the thousands and thousands of choices? Yeah. And oftentimes we don't have a great model. We don't spend time learning how to be actually successful in that thing. There's usually a handful of superstars in any industry, and the rest of everybody's just trying to make it. And so getting back to that mindset, not just going back, but like doing it better with intention. Like I'm choosing to apprentice this particular domain and seeing, man, one of the greatest things about this and this experience is that you're telling people exactly the types of businesses that tend to do extremely well from an investment perspective. But this isn't the flashy, like get rich fast type of mentality. Yeah. So can you talk about some of those businesses for people to consider as far as investments? And then, of course, I know people are going to be like, well, where would I get any money to invest? And so let's talk about that as well.
Well, today, great example, announcement came out, Jersey Mike's sub chain sells to Blackstone for $8 billion. So it's a sandwich shop. It's a sandwich shop that's just sold for $8 billion. We have in our portfolio, we have a company called Resi Brands. They own one company called That One Painter. This is Steven, who started as a painter 11 years ago, just painting. And 11 years later has a business that'll do $40 to $50 million this year in revenue, bootstrapped entirely. We were some of the first capital he ever took into his business in order to get it to the next level because he wants to build $1 billion painting company. We got 2 young kids in the portfolio. They run a company called Pink's Window Cleaning. They started Pink's with a couple bucks that they had individually. They clean windows. They got these cool outfits. They have a brand. They have like real swag about how they do things. And just one of their locations does $3 million a year in Austin. And so my point is, all around us are what I call these Main Street millionaires, these standard small business operators who aren't inventing the next Tesla or Tinder, but they are instead making a business that we need. We need our windows to be clean. We need our roads to be paved. We need our roofs to be fixed. We need our houses to be painted. And there's a lot of competitors, but there's a lot of demand. And our competitors aren't that good. And these businesses have an opportunity to be revitalized. And so these boring businesses are all around us and they cash flow. And the interesting part about them is, how do we know that they're going to continue to cash flow in the future? Well, nobody gives loans to a painting company. Nobody gives VC funding to a window cleaning company. That just doesn't happen. It probably will in the future because I won't shut up about it on the internet. But prior to this, you knew these companies were profitable because they had no choice. Nobody was giving them money to burn in like a SaaS marketplace. And so I think we got to get back to realizing that these businesses in particular have a ton of profitability in them. Now, they're not huge margin businesses where you can sit on your computer in your ivory tower, make 80% margin, not work very much. Like, you can't do that. You got to get your fingers a little dirty. But I'm not sure it even makes us happy sitting behind a desk on Zoom meetings all the time, remote working for a big tech company. I think we were sold a lie. And in fact, if you met my Pinks guys, if you met my painter, Steven, Those are some happy motherfuckers that are out there making millions of dollars and also making their community a little cleaner again.
Yeah, yeah. You share some statistics on this as well. Just even working in businesses like that, people tend to be more happy.
Yeah.
From the proprietor themselves to the employees. And we have this huge wave of people. There's so much unrest and unhappiness in our modern businesses. And part of this is the corporate capture. Yeah. And this was one of the things that really was like, I've got to talk to you, was you brought this right to my face, that there's this mist creeping in with all these massive, well, there's not that many, these massive corporations buying up small businesses and buying up homes right now. All right. Can you share a little bit about that? What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, perfect example, Jersey Mike's with Blackstone. I mean, basically what you have in the world today is you have 3 companies that control 40% of all public stocks. That's BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And I worked at 2 of them previously. Now, a lot of people might say, wait a second, those are passive funds. Those are exchange traded funds. So they don't actually own all those companies and actively operate them. They don't, but they have what's called governance over those companies because they own the shares. And Bill McNabb, who is a CEO of Vanguard, has said publicly, we are not passive in our governance. So our big public stocks, we have 3 companies that own 40% of our entire stock market. When it gets to the S&P, the S&P 500, those same companies own 80% of the S&P 500. There are very few that own on top, and the rest of us have to say thanks. Then we go to the private sector. And in the private sector in 2000, we had private equity own 4% of U.S. companies. Flash forward to 2020, they own 20% of U.S. private companies. We are having this creeping mist of the few owning everything. And the way that we push back on that is not shopping local, although that's great, but instead it is actually owning our own businesses. And here's the upside. We know that when we go into a Starbucks these days, our experience is much less fun, kind, pretty, unique than going into a local coffee shop. Tanner and I were just in a lovely local coffee shop here. It was great. They were super nice. They had fun pillows. It felt good in there. They had a little candle burning. You go into Starbucks, they spell your name wrong. They're a little angry that you're there. It's pretty dirty. Coffee's not very good, right? So what happens at scale with some of these companies is when they're community businesses, they lose their community soul. So we can actually compete with the big guys. And I believe that to be true. And if we can compete with the big guys, that means we get to keep the profits. They don't. You spend $1 at a local store. We have 60 cents of those dollars stay in your local community. You spend $1 with Amazon, only 10% of that stays with your local community. So we are having all of this consolidation of money. And it's not because Bezos is a bad guy. He's a brilliant fucking businessman. I'd never want to compete with him. But the problem is incentives are misaligned when there's no skin in the game. And the last thing I'll say is what I'm really concerned about is if we don't take this opportunity to go and buy our businesses back, we are going to have a massive tragedy of the commons. And the tragedy of the commons is an economic phenomenon where when nobody owns anything, or when everybody owns a little bit of something, then everything falls apart. And let me explain what I mean by this. If you go to Section 8 housing, if you build Section 8 housing, which is owned by the federal government, subsidized, and you allow people to live there, but they don't own anything in the Section 8 housing. There's no home ownership versus the same exact building right next door to it. Same construction, same purpose, but you allow these people to have ownership in the non-Section 8 housing. Which one do you think depreciates faster? Section 8. Rapidly. Why? Because you don't burn down the house that you own, but you don't really give a shit about the bird scooter that you ride down the street that you throw over on the side of the road and you beat the hell out of because it's not yours. It's human nature. And so I'm very concerned that if we don't start owning these small businesses, then nobody cares about our local community because we have no skin in the game and we become an entire nation that quietly quits.
For me, I'm all about getting to the root cause. All right. And obviously we're, as we talked a little bit about, being programmed to be poor. And because I grew up living in Section 8 housing. All right. So when you asked, do I have an experience being poor? Yeah, we got Christmas gifts from a charity, you know, And, having that experience, there are certain things that changed the course of my life. And to look back and to know, and these are some of the things you point out, because right now you're like, what is he about to say? These are things you specifically point out that can change the trajectory of somebody's life. And it was exposure, right? And you talk about this economic interconnectedness and how that can literally change your financial outcomes, because our environment has a huge impact on our outcomes, especially financially. But what if someone comes from lesser means? What if somebody comes from a very poor environment? They're growing up in a glorified food desert. They're living on Section 8. Yep. What makes the difference? Because there is a difference to be made, even if you're coming from the worst of circumstances.
Yeah, it's so fascinating studies on this. Basically, one of the studies that I dug into was about the fact that if you have a group of young people and they're all in, let's say, St. Louis, it might have even been St. Louis where the study was, but let's say there's two groups of people, they're both in St. Louis, and both segments have the same economic background. So by and large, family A makes $50,000 a year. Family B makes $50,000 a year. Two parents, the kids are the same age, almost all things being equal. But they live in slightly different sections of St. Louis. Now, the average of both of the communities that they live in is about the same income-wise, like about the same. Maybe the average income is $50,000. But in community A versus community B, there are some outliers. There's a lot more outliers. There are some people that make 150. There are a few people that make $1 million in that neighborhood. And so the people who don't make a ton of money engage more with people who do make a ton of money. And so we have rich and poor just swapping stories, maybe hanging out, maybe going to school together. What's fascinating, a long-term study over many, many years shows that all things else being equal, the group that had more interactions with rich people than the other group over time made 30% more money, material degree of wealth over their lifetime. And what I thought was fascinating about that is it goes to show the importance of exposure, to your point. To how can you get around a few rich people that get you to just see the world a little bit differently. I was living in Washington, D.C., and I lived in Columbia Heights. And the area that I lived in was not very nice. Some of it was gentrifying, some of the houses were whatever. But one of my neighbors who lived right next door, Terrence, he had never been on a train, never been on a plane, and never left DC. And Terrence was really, really cool and would kind of look out for the rest of the people in the neighborhood. And so he brought over a young woman who would come and study at his house often. Her house was more tumultuous, so she couldn't study very well there. And Terrence was old. I mean, he looked great. He was always gardening, but he must have been in his 80s. And this young woman, I won't say her name, but she... I remember when I first met her, she was like, "What do you guys do? Because you look rich." And I remember kind of laughing because, as you're older, you forget that you think things like that when you're a little bit younger, but maybe don't say them. And I was like, well, I kind of explained what we did. And she goes, "So you went to college?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And so I started talking to her about how do you get in college and what happened. And she told me that nobody in her family had ever been to college. And she actually didn't know really anybody that went to college. And this is Washington, D.C., the capital of our country, like one of the power centers of the world. And yet in this little neighborhood, there was this bubble where people really didn't escape it or get out of it, or they got pushed out of Columbia Heights into another neighborhood as it started to gentrify. And I remember talking to this young woman and, explaining that there are all these things called grant and you go to the library, and we could show her how to do that. And anyway, my husband actually helped her more than I did. I don't want to sound like I was like it was all her decision to make changes in her life. But I remember in that moment thinking, man, one meeting, one question could actually change the trajectory of your life. And I got lucky that my parents had a few friends that were well off that I could kind of see. And I got lucky that my parents worked really hard to be like the non-nicest house on the best block that we could be in. And because of that, probably it changed the trajectory of my life forever. Yeah. And I always liked that saying too, that you can't be what you can't see. Yeah. And so, if you don't see other people that look like you, have a background like you, achieving the things you want, you kind of think that maybe it's not for you. Maybe that's for people that are something special, not like you. Yeah. So I think it's really important. And, I think also your generation, our generation as dads is really, really cool because, like my dad, for instance, he was like you in some ways. So when he grew up, his parents worked super, super hard. But he would tell me that my grandfather, his father, could never come to any of his sporting events. He was always working. Like I don't think he'd ever probably seen my dad do that. And they didn't have like the type of relationship that I have with my father or my brother does with my parents. It was dictatorial. It was not a democracy in that family. And it wasn't participating either. It was like, you do this, you're the kid, you go. I try to do the best I can as a dad. And so my father broke that cycle with me, like it sounds like you're doing with your kids. He was at every single one of my sporting events. He coached a girls softball team, which is like a second level of hell in general, and then in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's 120 degrees, awful. And he was at everything. And I think a lot of times people ask me, like, what was your family like? Like, you turned out okay. So how do you think that happened? And I give a lot of the credit to my dad and my mom, because he just showed up for everything, coached everything. And then my mom made sure that education was a top priority. Like, it was not an option to not be educated. And for first generation, I think that makes a huge difference,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So with that being said, I want to talk about how people can get started. All right. If people are wanting to create real financial freedom for themselves, if they're wanting to help to surpass or move past the number one stressor in our culture today. Again, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, has affirmed upwards of 80% of all physician visits are for stress-related conditions. And the number one stressor in our world today is money. And yet we're not taught about money. So with that being said, let's talk about the RICH acronym.
Oh, of course.
Let's dig in.
Yeah. So in the book, here's my idea. There's many ways to get rich. I think we have this generational wealth creation event happening. So if you buy into what I'm saying, which is that there's about, let's call it somewhere around 10 to 11 million small businesses for sale in the US right now. Most of these businesses will not be bought or sold. They will close. That means we have a massive supply of businesses available for purchase that are profitable businesses that people can take over and run. So if that is true, then the question is, well, how do I learn how to do that? Because we're not taught that. And so I started obsessing on this book about 3 years ago. And the idea was I take everything I've learned in private equity and investing over the past long time, 15 plus years, and can I consolidate how to buy a business into a book that's as short as humanly possible and as long as it needs to be. And so we had this idea that there are really 4 steps to buying a business. And it starts with R, so that's research. First and foremost, if you have $10,000 to spend, if you have $1,000 to spend, if you have $100 to spend, I believe you should spend it on yourself first, which means I want you to invest in your education before almost anything else. I want you to spend this time learning what businesses are appropriate for buying, how do people buy them, what is due diligence, how does it look like to finance these businesses, what does it look like to structure the deals and close them. I want you to do your research. Research is the foundation for riches. Then after we have learned the core tenets of how to buy a business, then we start moving towards investment. So now how do we take either our dollars or other people's third-party dollars and invest in these businesses in order to get a return for us, them, and help the owner of the small business? Then we get into command. So now, how do we become not owned by our business, but the owner of our business? How do we take over a small business, have it run profitably, but not have it be miserable? Let's get in command of what it means to be an owner. And then finally, we have harness. And harness is where we start thinking generational wealth. So how do we learn how to do multiple deals? How do we grow said business from 0 to 7, 8, 9 figures? How do we build a holding company if we want to? Or how do we continue to do acquisitions just like we would real estate transactions, from our first studio that we might own to our next apartment to our first house to a multifamily unit? And I want people to think about buying businesses kind of like we think about buying real estate, except these things actually cash flow, as opposed to most real estate is just for taxation. So that's what Rich is. It's research, invest, command, and then harness.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that you mentioned how important it is for the research part. Mm-hmm. And I think that that can be overlooked, especially if somebody's motivated, they're excited, they can just go like, well, I can invest in this laundromat that's down the street right here, or go and talk to them. But finding out how to go about it is super important, obviously. So can we talk about, so you did mention already a few of the businesses that rarely ever fail for us to be mindful of and investing in. Can we cover some of those?
Yeah. So when it comes to small businesses, here's what I want you guys to think about. If you want a business that is less likely to fail than anything else, it really needs to have 4 components. 1, you want the business to be around more than 5 years. The longer a business has been around, the likelihood it's going to continue to be around. 2, you want a profitable business. You need a business that is not losing money. You need a business that is not a turnaround, at least not for your first deal. 3, you want a business that is simple to understand. You're already learning how to do acquisitions for the first time. Get rid of intellectual property ideas, proprietary. We don't want anything that we can't explain to grandma pretty easily. And then number 4 is, ideally for this small business, we want this business to be something that is in a recession-resistant asset class. So that might mean things like a plumbing company. Even if the economy goes down and your toilet breaks, you're calling a plumber. It might be a laundromat. People need clean clothes consistently. It might be a road sweeping business. We need clean roads even in a recessionary period. So we're thinking about the businesses that get done every single day and week, no matter what's happening in the world, as opposed to like a custom framing business or a podcast production build out business, right? Those would be more luxury businesses. And so if you have those 4 things, you have a pretty good foundation. The second thing that's really important, like if you're going to buy a business right now and you're figuring out, how do I determine if it will make enough money for me if I buy this business? I define income streams a very particular way. When you buy a business, an income stream means that the business you buy has to cover its debt service, which is like, let's say you're buying a house, you need to be able to afford the payment of the interest on the mortgage. So same thing for a business. You need to be able to afford an operator. You don't want to be the only person working in the business. Otherwise, it's a job, not a business. You need to have some operating capital. So you need to have some money for the business to continue to grow, because sometimes businesses go up and down. You want to manage the downside. And then lastly, you have to have enough money to pay for yourself. So when it comes to buying a business, I'm buying income streams. I am buying businesses that have these 4 things that allow me to make enough money off of them for me to feel like an owner and not owned by my business. Mm-hmm. That's the idea.
Got it. Now, let's just use the laundromat example. Why would somebody want to sell you their business in the first place, or give you a part of their business?
Yeah. Well, a fun thing to think about is, for anybody that's ever owned a business, actually, let's do this. If you're listening and you don't think somebody would sell a profitable business, go talk to 5 owners of businesses, small businesses that you know, and say, hey, I'm just curious. I've never owned a business, but would you ever sell your business at like the right price and the right terms to somebody? And just see what the answers are. And the answers you're going to get are like, yes, I would. Right now, you asking? Most of us that have been a business owner know that if you catch us on the right day that ends in Y, we'd probably sell this thing because it's hard. And if you have owned a business for a long time, you also have fatigue. So a lot of times in your business, you've been running this thing for 10 or 20 years, you might be ready for a new challenge. If you're going through a divorce, you might have to separate from your business. If you're getting older and you've got disease, which is happening chronically all over this country, you might need to exit your business. If you want to move, you just need some different demographics around you, you might need to sell your business. And so there are all these reasons why business owners want to sell. The real thing is catching them before they even realize it, because most times they will do what's called a slowdown and a close down, which is they don't think about their business like an asset. They don't think about it like a house. They think about it like, I'm just tired of this, so I'm going to like close it down and on to the next thing. Closing down costs them time and money. And most small business owners have 90% of their net worth tied up in their business. So if they have to close down their business, they got to go get a job because they don't have enough capital. So you are doing a huge service to a business owner when you creatively structure a deal so that you can profit off the business and they can continue to get an income too.
The next question would be, where would we get the money?
It's a great question. You're like, I would love to buy a business. I just don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions, which I felt the same way. There's three ways to buy a business in general, and I call it the get rich tripod. And so one leg of the stool is cash. Now there's lots of ways to get cash. You can do creative financing, which is like seller financing methods. You can do other people's money. You can do SBA loans and debt. We teach 21 different ways to get cash. So that's one leg of the stool. Another way is expertise. So let's say that you know how to grow sales. You're a great salesperson. Most small businesses need more clients. You help a small business grow their sales, grow their top line and their bottom line. You could get a percentage of the business for your efforts, your expertise. And the third way is sweat equity. Maybe you don't have a ton of expertise, but you're just going to remove some pain points from the owner of the business. You might find the deal in general. So for either time, aka sweat equity, expertise, or cash, you can buy a business. And one thing that I'd like to plant in people's heads, which is really hard to get people to break through on, is that you are never suffering from a lack of money. Just like, if you would have told me that a while ago, I'd been like, this bitch on the internet doesn't know. But you're never suffering from a lack of money. You are suffering from a lack of knowledge on how to get money. And I don't mean just your earned skills. I mean, if people taught us all the different ways we can get loans, we can get debt, we can get grants, we can get seller financing, we can get creative financing methods, we can get third-party capital. There are all these ways to get money, but we aren't taught it. And so you don't actually suffer from not having enough money. You suffer from not having enough knowledge. And if you can, and fixing knowledge will then fix money, which is a crazy thing to ponder.
Yeah. And the only thing stopping us is fear.
Right.
And once we start learning, the fear is going to be resolved. And you shared that this is so important, this fear part of the equation, because risk. And you also, there's a lot of little food, connections in this risk appetite. You talk about risk appetite and how much of an appetite you have. And for many of us, and actually, how about if you could share a time when you were risk averse and you had fear and maybe it was stopping you from investing in a business or doing something that was really important in your growth. Do you have any examples like that?
Oh, yeah. I remember the first time I bought a business, like this type of business, a boring business. It was a laundromat. And I talk about it in the book because I had an irrational fear. I remember buying that laundromat and the first time I stepped inside of it, because I wasn't living in the same city where I bought it. And so the first time I stepped inside of it, I owned that thing. And I remember it was beat up. It smelled like mold and like bleach, and it was kind of dirty. And I didn't know how to use any of the machines. And I kind of barely knew the guy I was operating the thing with. And it wasn't in the best part of town. And I remember looking around and going, oh my God, this is a terrible idea. Who does this? Like, most people have a midlife crisis and they buy a Porsche. I bought a liability. I bought, a problem. And I remember like thinking that was a really bad idea. And then we rolled up our sleeves and figured it out. But I was even scared when I had money and it wasn't going to bankrupt me, and I did it. And so, Bill Perkins, who's a dear friend of mine that I quote a lot, said something the other day at one of our events for our community that stuck with me. He was like, he looked me in the face and he basically said, you have zero risk. And I was like, excuse me? I have so much risk. Like, I have this happening and this happening. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you have zero risk. He's like, most of us have zero risk. He goes, listen, Cody, right now today, and almost for anybody listening, if I lost everything, could I go and be a bartender and probably make like 50, 60, 70K somewhere? Yeah. Could I probably leave what I'm doing now and go be a salesperson for somebody else? Even if I had no connections, is it reasonable to think that I would be homeless, that I would be starving, and that I would have no opportunity? It's not reasonable. It's actually not reasonable at all. So that means that we basically have zero survival risk. All we have is ego risk, which means that we don't want to lose the relative game of, well, I'm here right now, and if I take this risk, I'm going to fall. I make this much in my job right now. If I take this risk, I'm going to be less than my peers. I'm going to go backwards. I'm not going to be able to keep my standing. And so because of that, we don't ever progress. And so fear holds us back really just based on our egos. And, I know plenty of people through my life, which is interesting, that have gone through bankruptcy proceedings. And I remember the first time I understood what bankruptcy was, which was like, defined is like you basically announce to the government that I don't have anything else. Like, you can't take anything else from me. I failed. Here's all the stuff that I have, and you get to take everything I have, and I have to go start over again. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, that's the scariest thing out there for me. I'm like, oh my God, what if I mess up so bad that I lose everything and people realize what a failure I am? Like, I still have that fear inside. I still have an irrational fear of having no money, even with as many businesses as we own now. I mean, my husband jokingly will often say, like, yeah, I think we've got like 2 companies. I'm like, there's like 50 in there. Like, have you checked lately? And he still in his head thinks that we don't have what we have because of where we started. And so I think risk is never going to leave you. And it's just that in the developed world, like we're in the US right now, you have a lot less of it than you think. And your biggest risk is probably not taking any, especially when you're young. Like, the younger you are, the more monetary risk you should take, in my opinion. You should go and work for the hardest company that you can get into, that teaches you more than anywhere else, that teaches you the skills at a level that you can't imagine, with other people who are better than you. And better than you at different things. And you should try to never be the smartest person in the room as often as possible. And you should get over yourself if you think that you are, because that's actually your big risk, is like playing too small, too young.
Yeah. Or you can just get on the phone and scroll.
Yeah, exactly. and you're right. And that's hard to not do, man. I mean, the world is designed right now to steal our attention, and our attention is our earning potential.
The whole goal of this book and this conversation for your audience would be to show people how to create peace, harmony, and abundance around money in their life, how to define what a rich life looks like for them, and how to understand and reflect on, if money was a person, if it was a relationship in your life, how is that relationship for you? So I'll give you an example, and I'm going to ask you to share this in a second. I asked a family member of mine, a relative of mine, if money walked into a restaurant, and you were in the restaurant and money walked in through the door, what would you do? If it was a person, if money was represented into a person, and this person was in their late 20s, and they said, I would run to the bar and avoid this person if it was money. I would talk bad about it behind its back. I would, but then I would fake and act like I liked it when it came up to me. And then I would use and abuse it when I needed it, and I would ghost it if it ever reached out to me. And I go, man, that seems like a really unhealthy relationship with money. And they were like, yeah, I know. And their environment, their experience around money has also replicated that connection, that feeling, that relationship. Yeah. And it doesn't mean something's good or bad, right or wrong, but it's asking ourselves, do we have a healthy relationship with money? Is it causing more pain in our relationships, intimately, in our environment? And if it is causing pain, how do we create a different relationship? So Shawn, if money walked in the door as a person, how would you respond?
The first thing that I would feel when you just pitched that, and I could see it, I would feel grateful to see money. And I would speak to money, and I would make sure that money wasn't there to, like, somebody else needed them more, right? I didn't want to be greedy with their time and attention, but also I'm open and welcome, and I know that money knows me well. And so, it would just be a vibe. It'd be a good vibe.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. And that's good. So you probably have a good relationship with money because that's how the experience is. So it probably means like when someone gives you a check or you receive money, you have a good feeling. It probably also means when you're spending money to invest in something or you're going on a trip, you're not stressed and anxious about it. Like, oh, I'm spending this money. I have to really penny pinch everything. Maybe you're not extravagant spending everywhere constantly, but you have a good relationship and a good balance with it, which is healthy and a secure relationship. And most people don't have a secure relationship with it. Yeah. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do is give people the tools and the knowledge to understand their money story, to see how their personality style matches with their wounds or their traumas around money, and just see, is that serving you in your life? Do you have a rich life because of the story and the style that you've developed over time? If not, how do we start rewiring you emotionally in your nervous system to feel safe with money when it comes to you, when it leaves you? There's a mantra I have that it's the more I relax, the more I can receive. When I'm tight, when I'm clenched, when I'm anxious, when I'm stressed out, it's hard to receive love, affection, money, opportunities. It's hard to see the opportunities when we're in that fight and flight mode, right? But the more I relax, the more I can see and I can receive and I can be generous and all these things can happen. And I just see so many people struggling with money. And I'm in no way some money guru. I don't know the best place to invest your money. I don't know where you should be doing these things. I have my strategies that make me feel good. This is more about understanding your story and your belief system around it and how to heal that so you have a beautiful relationship and a rich and abundant life.
Yeah. You mentioned that money is a magnifier
yes.
of who you are. So many of us, we think that money is going to change us and our circumstances. and so what you really pointed out is that with building wealth and making money easy, we want to not just, you're giving people those insights on how do we get to that place financially, but also to have the fulfillment and a rich life as well.
Yes.
And so a big part of this, and you've already mentioned this several times, you said the key word is a relationship. And we're in relationship with everything. Everything is a relationship. We're in a relationship with our food. We're in a relationship, obviously, we tend to think about it just in terms of people, with our spiritual connection. Whether if we're reading a book, we're in a relationship with that thing. And so starting to personalize it, I love that example of if money walked into the room and you hear the different spectrum of answers that I gave versus someone else.
Yeah, you'd be grateful, you'd greet it, you'd be generous. Hey, how are you? What do you need today?
Yeah.
There's I interviewed a guy who wrote a book called Happy Money, which is, his name's Ken Honda out of Japan. And
I met him at Agape.
You did?
Yeah.
He's such a sweet guy.
Yeah.
And he does all these kind of social experiments with himself, or he has over the years. And one of them was, he didn't have a good relationship with money at one point. And he said, every time I see money, I'm going to thank money. And I'm just going to do this little simple practice inside that, like, if I find a penny on the street, I'm going to say thank you. If someone gives me $1 million, I'm going to say thank you. I'm just going to say thank you whenever I get any type of payment that comes into my bank account. Thank you. Thank you. Gratitude. Gratitude. And then he follows it up with saying, thank you, money. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go in my bank account? Do you want to go to an investment? Do you want to buy you a home with you? Do you want me to give you away? Do you want to pay for someone's coffee? Where do you want to go? And he has this direct relationship, and he's very intentional every time money comes, where it's going to go. He gives it a direction. He has this relationship with it, and it's almost like he's talking to money as if it was a person, as if it was like a living being. It was like this energetic being. And it doesn't mean he's like worshiping money. He just has a relationship with it that makes him feel emotionally safe and abundant. And food is energy, and so is money. Money is energy, food is energy. And when you eat things with a lower frequency within the food, it's going to affect your energy physically. And you're going to have a relationship with that constant eating. You're probably going to gain weight. You might have inflammation. You're going to get sick maybe at times. Your immune system's going to be suppressed. And on the opposite side, when you start eating healthier foods, you have a different relationship with that energy, and you're nourishing yourself with that energy. And I think we need to be thinking about money in that same nourishment attitude, that same reflection, that same relationship. And you talk about the food side of things so much. It's like having a relationship with your food. I love the cookbook that you have, where it's like sitting down with your family, talking thanking food. You know, people pray over their food, and there is this intention setting, thank you, food, for being here. Thank you for people that made this food. Thank you to whoever made it here, preparing this food. It's creating a ritual. It's not worshiping food, but it's creating a beautiful relationship with it. And I think, again, our beliefs around food impact and influence our behaviors on what we're going to eat. And that impacts everything. The same thing with our beliefs and behaviors around money.
You could have just changed everybody's life just now, getting that part, you know, the same thing with our food and having gratitude and Thanksgiving and blessing the food, blessing the people involved in it, and having that relationship with money as well, and not making it, it's not that you're worshiping money, because of course that's that tenet that can make people repel money is the root of all evil.
Yes.
It's the love of it, right? Making that your God. And we know some people make that mistake as well, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about having a healthy relationship, because here's a concept: to eat that food, probably going to need some money. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's all in relationship. And so a big part of this relationship that we have, in my perspective, when money walked in the room, it's different from what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 15, 25 years ago.
What was it like when you were broke, in Ferguson, Missouri? Struggling, and your back was broken, and you couldn't walk, and you're not making money. What was your relationship like with money then?
Whew, man, if I could tune into that.
And you're eating fast food all day, and you're sick, and you're, victim mindset.
To be honest, I probably wouldn't even recognize money. Money came in on with a trench coat, and you know what I mean? It would be like money would be like a Superman type, look like, is that kind of Clark Kent's got glasses on, kind of look like, I wouldn't have even been able to recognize.
Really?
For sure.
So what if you would have known, okay, money, someone announces money is walking in the door right now, and it says, here it is. What would you have done in that moment? What would your immediate relationship have been like?
I would have just stayed in my lane. Yeah, I would have just stayed in my lane, if money, this is a thing. And now as that I'm talking about this, and this is why I love talking with you too, I would feel that money would notice me. I would feel that money would notice me. It would
see you.
Yeah, would notice me. And not necessarily, again, come and talk and all that stuff, but I would see, and maybe this is like a prediction of my future, right? But I wouldn't have been feeling like I deserved, per se, to be noticed, but I just would have felt like I had, there's something about me that money would notice, right? So that would be the extent.
It would have noticed you. Maybe it would have spoken to you or not, but it would just said, "Oh, I see this person over there is struggling," or
not necessarily struggling, but just like there's some, I see you. What's up? Okay, like that.
And how would you have responded if money came up to you and said, "Hey, I see you. I see your potential"?
Whoa. I would probably. I'm conflicted right now. I'd probably be like, part of it is like, it's about time.
Yeah.
The other part would be like, are you sure? Like, I don't think I'm ready for this. I'm not. I don't think that I'm worthy of this. So this leads me to my point, which is our relationship with money is dependent upon our story, and our story about ourselves, about our relationship with life, who we see ourselves as. And so let's talk a little bit more about our story in regards to like our money blueprint.
Yeah. I'll share you a couple moments of my story. When I was younger, and I think people could relate to some of this, and I would love for you to leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment of some of your money story memories below or somewhere on social media so Shawn can see this. But my money story was tied to stress and chaos, because my parents, I don't like to use the word always, but frequently they were stressed out, screaming at each other, slamming doors, and it just seemed to tie into a sense of lack. I remember playing kind of roller hockey in the neighborhood parking lot, and I was the only one who had sneakers, not rollerblades, because we couldn't afford it. So it's like, okay, like I was playing with them, but I couldn't afford it. Nintendo was big. I couldn't afford the Nintendo. So it's like I wasn't able to get those things. So we had a home, we had food, all these things, but there was always stress around it, which has caused part of my story. There was a time where my brother went to prison, and there was a lot of money stress around that, paying for lawyers and just kind of going in debt, my parents, right? So it was like this trauma tied to, we didn't have the money to pay for things, plus my brother's in prison for selling drugs to an undercover cop. And there was just kind of like trauma tied to money and pain. During that time, I wasn't really allowed to have friends in the neighborhood growing up in a small town in Ohio, because everyone knew that my older brother was in jail. So they didn't want to hang out their kids with me. And I remember there was a moment where these two kids started a club. I don't know if you're ever in a club as a kid. These two kids started a club, like an after-class club or whatever, in the basement of their house. And I was like, I really want to be in this club because I didn't have friends. They said, well, you either need to answer a list of questions to get in to see if you're smart enough, or if not, you have to pay to be in the club. And I was like, I don't have any money. So what are the questions? They asked me the questions. I didn't know the answers. They're like, you can't be in the club unless you pay us. It's a $5 entry fee. So I went home and I asked my mom, I said, Mom, I really want to get in this club and be friends with these kids. Can I have $5? And I could see the disappointment in her mind, not because she didn't want me to be friends with them or be a part of this club, but she didn't have the money. She goes, let me see what I can find. She's literally asking me to flip over the cushions and the couches and just, they'd spent all their money on like legal fees, and it wasn't like they had a lot. Somehow she finds in an hour's time change and puts it in a shoebox for me, $5 and change. So I go to this house where these kids are, I give them the shoebox, and they let me in their club, but for the next hour, they're just hanging out with themselves, and I'm kind of alone in the corner in the basement, like, what am I doing? It was the most like depressing, like even just thinking about it, it's like a wound. It's a story, it's a memory that shaped my personality style. It shaped me in a certain way. And there's other stories like that. I remember I went home afterwards after that night, and I never went back to that club because I didn't feel good. I didn't feel worthy still, even though I paid, right? And there's certain stories like that. I had money stolen from me. I used to steal money a lot from people. And it's like, it shaped me, these wounds that I had to learn how to break, and I had to learn how to heal. And it just took time. And I think whoever's watching or listening, like write in a story that you have that shaped your history and type in a money wound or two. Like, can you remember something? You don't have to share all the details, but something that happened that you still think about today that might have shaped part of your personality style with money. And you said this, you weren't ready for money. One of my money mentors early on, when I was broke on my sister's couch, I was working for free for someone as an intern. And my payment was I could ask him questions at any moment. So every day we'd go for lunch and I'd just ask him questions and he would teach me. And one day I was like, man, I'm broke. I could really use some money. And he said, money comes to you when you're ready for it. And I was just like, I feel pretty ready for money right now. Like I could use it. I'm on my sister's couch. I don't have any money. I feel helpless. I was 23, 24 at the time. And I was just like, I don't feel like I'm living up to my potential. I can't do anything with my life. I don't have a car. I just felt like a bum. He's like, money will come to you when you're ready for it. And as painful as it was to hear at that time, about a year and a half, 2 years later, I started to make some money. And I remember reflecting back to that moment, and I was like, if someone had handed me $5,000, I would have blown it because I wasn't ready for it. I needed to learn certain skills on how to navigate money better. And that's why you see a lot of people, the statistics with people that win a lot of money in the lottery, they go broke within a couple of years, they commit suicide, they go through depression, all these different things because they weren't ready for it. Some people maybe were, and they got lucky. You see this with elite athletes who go bankrupt within a couple of years after retiring from sports. Maybe they're ready for the spotlight, but they're not ready to manage the money, the wealth that comes to them at 19 years old. They don't have the energy, the emotion connected to it on how to really navigate it. Yeah. And all the different relationships that people want from you now. Now that you have success, you have money, and everyone's asking for something from you. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good if money walked in and you just said, give me money. It doesn't like that relationship. What are you going to provide for the money? How are you going to serve money as well? Where's the common thread in the relationship? And so I really had to learn that like money comes to you more when you're ready for it. And even when you're ready to make it, it doesn't mean you're going to have a healthy relationship with it. I still was hoarding my money for the first 8 years because I was afraid to go back to my sister's couch. I was afraid to go broke again. So I wasn't really able to enjoy it. Sure, I felt like I had safety and like a safety net. If something happened and I couldn't make money, I had it saved, but I wasn't living a rich life internally because I was still living in fear around it. And I think, again, one of the biggest problems people have is when you make money and you start to make it and you start to use your talents, your skills, and add value to something, and you start earning money and you can't appreciate it. You can't appreciate it. You can't be in peace still. For me, that's a big problem.
What you're doing with this relationship with money is you're bringing it right into our face.
Yes.
Right? Because this is happening whether we like it or not, understand it or not. We're having a relationship with money. But so often, and you know this, like our culture, we're programmed in a way that, you know, we pick up these stories, right?
Yes.
Your story is similar. It's the majority of us have dysfunctional stories around money.
Yes.
And we believe subconsciously is like, if we check all the boxes, then we can make money, right? Like I go to school, go to college, get a good job, and then I'm going to be financially successful.
Yeah.
And most people that follow that track are not just not successful
they
monetarily, they're in debt.
They're in debt.
Our society is set up in a way that is encouraging people being in debt.
Yes.
And creating all this anxiety, creating dysfunctional relationships, furthering them, you know? And so one of the cool things about the book is that, and my favorite section is taking you to money therapy.
Yes.
All right. So I thought we would go through some of those steps of going to money therapy.
Okay.
All right. So step number one in taking yourself to money therapy is identifying your money triggers.
Yeah. One for me, and again, it may not ever leave you, right? It's like healing is a journey. And so your triggers might be a journey as well. And the goal is to just notice them and ask yourself, okay, do I feel safe? If not, let me create safety within my nervous system. When I feel safe within my nervous system, then I can respond differently to these triggers. So for me, when I felt like someone was taking advantage of me, it felt like abuse because I was sexually abused as well as a kid. Talked about that on the show. And so that could show up in any little thing. If someone's cutting me off in a car, it's like I could feel like I'm being abused. So there's little triggers. Or if I feel like someone's trying to overcharge for something, I'm like, they're trying to take advantage of me. It's like unfair.
Yeah.
And I could feel like this trigger.
Connected to that wound.
Exactly. And so, you know, I'm not really as reactive now as I used to be, but those could still be triggers that could show up if I'm not doing the practices, if I'm not continuing to be on the healing journey with money therapy. And so that's just something for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something, again, as we're going through, and by the way, of course, get the book like yesterday, but being able to identify what your triggers are, your money triggers.
When some big announcement comes out about me and people see it, and then I see people reach out to me and I know they haven't reached out to me for years and they reach out to me and it's almost like there's this feeling that they're about to ask for something. And then within like a few weeks, they say, hey, can you help me with this? Or can you help me with this? It may be innocent, but I also feel like, they haven't been investing in the relationship for years. And all of a sudden they want something from me because they see me doing something well. That can be a trigger where I feel taken advantage of. And I'm like, they want me for my success or my money, or they're going to ask for money. So it's just learning to like be okay and feel safe within myself around these things. And also, I don't have to give everything to everyone. I can create boundaries, healthy boundaries, but just not feel as triggered about it.
Let's move to number 2 here. So number 1, identify your money triggers. Number 2 is to write it down.
Yeah. I just think it's powerful to like identify within your mind and think about these stories, but then write down a kind of a list of these triggers, these wounds, these things, so you can have them in the forefront and start to address them one by one, start to process them, start to see what acts can I take that will support me in overcoming these things that cause me anxiety in my nervous system when I think about it, or cause me these triggers. Just having the awareness, writing it down is a powerful act.
Yeah. I love that. It's just, again, getting it out of your head.
Getting it out, man.
And speaking it, whether it's speaking it out, which goes to this next one, talk to a safe person.
Yeah, don't talk to someone who's caused the trigger or the trauma necessarily right away. Talk to someone that you trust, a mentor, a friend, a therapist, a coach, a priest, whatever it might be that you feel safe with to address these things. it's going to give you so much more peace just speaking about it with someone that's trustworthy who can listen. Not someone who caused the trauma that you want to like scold them. You know, maybe there's another time for that where you can come to peace with them if that's possible. But getting it out, thinking about it, writing it down, speaking it out.
Yeah. And again, this is a process. This is taking yourself to money therapy. Yes. Identify your money triggers, write it down, talk to a safe person. The next one, number 4, is to forgive yourself and others.
Man, I don't know about you, but I held on to so much resentment towards myself about stealing as a kid. For about 1.5 years, I stole every time I went into a store, from like 10 and a half to like 11 and a half, 12. It was like every time it was like a game, and it was trying to get attention because I didn't feel like I had no friends. I had no validation. I had wounds, and it was trying to be seen. You know, I didn't think anyone was seeing me. And it gave me a sense of power by being able to steal. And it was like candy bars, or like, it wasn't like a ton, but it was still, I was living out of integrity every single day I went into a store to try to feel powerful because I felt powerless. And in return, I hurt a lot of people. You know, I hurt these store owners. I might have hurt employees who maybe were counting inventory and they had missing inventory, whatever it might have been. I caused pain on other people. And for years, I would beat myself up and I was like, God, I was such an idiot. How could I do this? I was so stupid. What was I thinking? And sure, I should have a consequence to that, but holding on to that pain and resentment of myself for decades did not serve me. And again, there's a good part of the consequence of like knowing this. Part of me, when I had money, I just wanted to pay for everyone all the time. I was like, I just want to pay it forward. I'm going to pay everyone's meal. I'm going to pay for everything, whatever it might be, because I felt guilty. Right? So there was maybe some good side to it also, but then I just felt shameful as well. And that shame doesn't create anything abundant. That energy of shame is very low frequency energy. It doesn't create abundance. And so that I lived in scarcity. And it wasn't until I started to forgive myself for all the things I did when I was 10, 11, 12, whatever, stealing and hurting people in that way, then I was able to be more at peace. And again, my intention is to give people the tools to feel financially free. It doesn't mean you're going to have millions of dollars in the bank, but you'll hopefully be peaceful and harmonious around the money you have or don't have, because you've cultivated that within you. And that takes healing, forgiveness, letting go of self-criticism of what you used to do. Now that we have awareness, we can make different decisions. And when we feel abundant versus scarce, we can live the most powerful habit within the 7 habits in the book, which is the mindset habit, which is to be generous and grateful and continue, all the time. Like you said, if money walked in the door, you'd be grateful. You'd say, thank you for being here. And most people say, I'll give when I have money. But we need to flip that on its head and say, this is the first habit that I need to have to create a rich and abundant life, is to be grateful and give generously. Even if you don't have money, you can think about ways you can give of your time, of your energy, of your love, of your curiosity, of your presence, of your connection, of your connecting people together for them to flourish. You can think in other ways on how can I serve and give generously. And when I was 23, 24, 25, living on my sister's couch, broke as a joke, what your mom would say, had no money, living in college debt, living off my sister's food, and feeling worthless, feeling undeserving and unworthy, I had to shift out of that by saying, what can I give? I didn't know because I didn't have a college degree yet, and I didn't think I had skills to contribute to anyone. But what I did have was passion. I had like hunger. I had a curiosity. I was able to be consistent with my goals and follow up and do whatever it took. And little did I know, Shawn, that I would make a multi-million-dollar business off of asking questions and being curious. Like, one of my skills was asking dumb questions to people and just being like, how do you do this? And well, how'd you do this? And what about this moment? I never thought that was an asset, but we all have these invisible assets within us that when we can cultivate and give them generously, we can live a rich and abundant life.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I love the framing on that. You know, what people would think, why are you asking dumb questions?
I know, right?
No, you literally built, not only that did you build this success for yourself, but you've impacted the lives of so many millions of people, so many. And it's just like you've paid it forward immensely in ways you don't even realize,
Exactly.
you know, because of that audacity, you know, and it was kind of, this is the cool thing, it was built into you already. And that's where you're directing people to with Make Money Easy, which is directing them inward, because we all have a personal relationship and to be more aware of it. And so I want to take you to number 5 here on this list. After forgive yourself and others, again, we're taking ourselves to money therapy.
Yes.
Number 5 is to practice overcoming your triggers. So this is practice.
That's it, man. When someone
Talking
cuts you
about
off,
practice?
Practice. We're talking about playoffs. When, you know, I used to get triggered a lot in LA when I first came out here because of being stuck in traffic. I just didn't like it. And I literally felt like people were trying to hurt me and abuse me when they would cut me off. And I realized, oh, something is wrong. This was all before my healing journey. And I realized, oh, something is off. And so now if that happens again, you know, it wouldn't be that extreme, but if someone cuts me off and I don't like it, now I act differently. I take a deep breath. We are going to be given our triggers on a daily basis. And we get to prepare for them in the beginning of the day and then reflect on how we showed up at the end of the day. I love meditating first thing in the morning and saying, how do I want to show up today? What is my intention for today? When something goes wrong, how can I respond? And rehearsing and practicing it. And just noticing I'm going to take a deep breath in my nervous system and I'm going to try to do my best to manage it, not be perfect. And at the end of the day, I like to reflect, did I show up with the intention I had today? And I think that is a key in practicing overcoming yourself. When you write all these things down, when you think about it, when you write down your money triggers and your stories, you start speaking about them, you can start to process them. When you process, you can start to practice it better when it comes up again. Because these triggers and things will show up for you constantly in your life until you overcome them. And so it is a goal and a vision and an intention every morning to say, how do I want to show up today? When something happens, when my mom calls me and asks for money, how do I want to respond? Let me practice this. I'm not going to be perfect, but let me do better than last time. When someone cuts me off, when someone asks me for help, whatever it is, based on these triggers, how can I respond? And I think it's just a constant practice in the healing journey.
So the last one here ties perfectly in taking yourself to money therapy is to motivate yourself to grow. That's number 7.
I just think, you know, learners are earners. And when we continue to learn and develop skill sets, we have the ability to earn more, again, financially, but earn more spiritually, emotionally, physically, and relationally in life. And so continue to invest in learning and receiving feedback. And unfortunately, for many years, I would, you know, make the same mistakes over and over again and just be in pain, as opposed to saying, okay, this doesn't work anymore. Let me take the feedback and start learning new information and acting in a different way. And it's secular, you know, it's like you've got to heal the money story to create a new belief system for yourself that something is possible. And maybe you've never seen it possible for you yet. Like for years, I didn't know it was possible for me to make money. Once my dad got into his accident, all his money was gone. He was my backup plan to go work for him. I didn't have a college degree, living on my sister's couch. I didn't know, like it just didn't resonate with me. Why would anyone give me money? Why would anyone hire me, give me money? For what skill? I didn't have any skills. So I had to start shifting that belief that no one's going to give me any money because I'm not valuable enough to earn money in this business world. And that was a hard thing to shift because I just didn't understand money. I started researching, reading books, learning about it, and just getting knowledgeable about it. Be like, okay, I'm learning more. It's not as scary. Once I learned more, I found money mentors. I talk about that in the book as well. And I found money mentors and I started asking them questions about how did they overcome it? And I could see before and after for them. Okay, I see models, mentors with models that I can mimic. Great. Now I just need a money map. I need a money game plan. And it doesn't need to be, what's my 10-year financial plan? Like, what's the next 3 months? How do I get enough money to get off my sister's couch? Not become a millionaire, screw all this Instagram life stuff. How do I make $1,000 a month? Let me just figure this one thing out. And from there, I learn, I act, and I get feedback. and I laugh my way to the bank. I learn, I act, and I get feedback. And that's the key.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
Whether it's the brain or the heart, we emanate energy. Some people call it vibration, some people call it oscillation. As an example, the heart itself emanates energy that's measurable about 3 to 5 feet away from you. And this is why there are people you can walk up to and you immediately feel goodness